Easy. So what else is happening?
Everything will be fine, Mum.
Yeah. And just
Shit, how do you fix it? Is it? It's a line.
I'm here Friday.
We were born. Okay. Oh, good.
Where was that?
Welcome councillors, staff and gallery to the January meeting of council. I'll open the meeting this evening with a prayer, so join me in prayer. Thank you, Lord, for the opportunity as Mayor of the Barossa Council and for each elected member as leaders and the community decision makers. Give each one the knowledge and the understanding, the wisdom and the courage to represent all our citizens. May we put the interest of others as our first priority. And Heavenly Father, we look forward to the year working together for our community. We ask in Jesus' name, amen. Members, I also acknowledge the traditional owners of country and throughout the Barossa region and sincerely recognise their continued connection to land, waters and their culture. I pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. Apologies. We have an apology from Councillor Lane, who is enjoying the tennis, and I think we already had a little photo of him in the stadium. Couldn't get our Australian over the line last night, but there we go. So we'll record that apology. Confirmation of the previous minutes, the minutes of the previous meeting, and those minutes of the council meeting held on Tuesday the 20th of December at 5:30. Would someone like to move those for me? Councillor Hearn and seconded Councillor Angus. All those in favour? Carried. Item 3.1.1 is a petition, Isaac Street, Mount Pleasant, on page 4, and there is a recommendation for council to consider. Moved Councillor De Vries and seconded Councillor Troop. Either one wish to speak? Thank you. All those in favour? Carried. Page 18 on the agenda is the Mayor's report. Any questions? Councillor Barrett.
Not a question, just that I was at the Santa Run and I actually participated in it. And so for the information of members, my name got left out. So just let people know I was there on the Santa Run at Williamstown.
My apologies, sir. You were well and truly.
I had tinsel on my walking poles.
Yes. And you did a mighty job.
Thank you.
Yes, no, my apologies. And it was quite a great little event.
It was.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Since we're doing this, I just...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Councillor Barrett,
since we're doing this, I was also at the Inclusive Playground opening and you and I had a flying fox competition. I beat you, but the photographer's camera was not operating, and in the rematch you beat me when it was on film. And I think there was a fix-in. So I'm going to call that Foxgate.
Foxgate, yeah, fair enough. Look, I just need to take more notes by the sounds of it. No, look, and it was a great event, and congratulations to all the staff and everyone involved. It's been really well received.
other questions?
Move that the report be received.
Moved councillor De Vries and seconded councillor Evans. All those in favour? Carried. Matters for information, items 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, 6.4 and 6.5. Any questions? Thank you. We'll move on to the debate agenda. The 7.1.1 is the monthly finance report on page 84. Any questions?
I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Moved councillor De Vries, seconded councillor Barrett. Either one wish to speak? All those in favour? Carried.
You better call it that. Off the item.
The next item is the review of the confidential orders on page 87.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll declare a conflict.
Irrigators Group Incorporated. Any questions? Really straightforward. Moved councillor Angus and seconded councillor Troop. Either one wish to speak? All those in favour? Carried. Seven 7.1.4 on page 93 is the proposal for the closure of a portion of Old Mill Road, Tarek Technologies, small section adjacent to the operations over there on Old Mill Road. Any questions? Question?
It's on the, yes, Kenneth probably heard.
Oh, councillor Shaw, sorry. Yep, you got in first.
Green's next.
Green's
Okay,
next.
sorry.
Oh, I'm ready to go, am I?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I've got some issues when we look at future of New and access in and out of our town, that it may not be something that's looked at now, but I know that Old Mill Road has been looked at in the past as an access and exit point to the town through to adjoin Greenock Road, which is now called Sir Condorlauki Way or whatever it is. And I would like to know how that could impact in the future, I mean, I'm talking the very distant future, that could, as our town grows and, the reasons to have accessibility, we don't want to have another Gawler on our hands. So I'm really concerned, as much as I know that they need to have access to their business, the future of what this means to the future of that road and how we can utilise it better in the future.
CEO?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Of course, the drawing there is not to any scale, so really the proposal wouldn't even come onto the existing road surface. The likelihood of connecting that road across the floodplain to Albemarle is extremely low. There's many other entrances and exits to the new Rialtoba. Your concern is a long way in the future, and it may have to be done at some stage, but under the current assessment, really what they're looking at is the bit that's unmade at the moment in any case. So they wouldn't actually be encroaching onto the made surface. They want just a little bit of what is essentially the unmade footpath.
So just where the loading canopy is?
Correct. That's all they want. Yeah.
That's fine.
Correct. And at the end of the day, all this is starting the process. They would then need to do a survey and provide us a more accurate figure. A more accurate diagram exactly what works for them, the turning circles, the heavy vehicle movements, etc., etc.
Yeah. Yes, so I agree with Councillor Schilling. Previous councils have discussed this issue, and it is a possibility. It's been in previous councils when I was here. It was certainly a possibility, and I could just ask the CEO then, with his comment that there are plenty of other access roads. I don't know of any others, but could you please advise me what your many other access roads would be?
There's 4 access roads into New Rialtoba already. There's actually 6 depending how you count them.
Yeah, that's that side of town, but this side of town.
There's at least 2 on this side of town, if you call it that side of town, as well as heading down the main highway to Tanunda is also an access point. But again, I'll reiterate, they're not actually talking about the road, the made road surface. So it doesn't stop council from, if it has to at some point in the future, of connecting that to Old Mill Road on the other side of the river.
Because someone else has got it on.
Oh, did you want to finish?
Oh, yeah, it's okay. If I could just speak out loud. There were other people.
So are we in question mode or in debate mode?
Yeah, it was a question and, I think we'll stay with questions. Yep.
Okay. This is a question for clarification. So I too was a bit concerned about some of the issues that have been raised. To the CEO, so on page 27, there's a bit of a mud map drawn. Am I right in saying then that it's only the area indicated in the purple line that we're talking about? Or are we talking about that?
Correct.
Okay, so the road itself is not going to be closed off?
Correct.
Okay, that was all I need to know.
I think. You can turn yours
Oh.
off, thanks.
I've got another question.
Yeah, I'll come back. You can turn yours off and come back.
I echo Councillor Schilling and Councillor Hearn on this. I'm a bit reserved about allowing or voting on this to happen. I was talking to an old councillor who actually said that there was plans at one stage to actually open up the Old Mill Road as a thoroughfare through to stop all the traffic going on to the Greenock Road. And there are plans in council somewhere that to the effect of that. So I'm very, very reluctant about allowing this to happen. Have semi-trailers and trucks, they'll need to be doing U-turns and reversing back into where they are supposed to be going, and they'll need to be taking up all of that road. So at this stage, unless there's more information coming about what semi-trailers, what trucks, the turning, getting into their access, I'd be very reluctant to allow this road closure at this stage. That's a question.
I'm going to answer yeah. I'm going to answer that question for you, councillor. Those initial plans was related to the freight route that we was developing, which was many years ago, and it was back when Penfolds was in its heyday, and we had multiple B doubles coming in and out of that site. We then looked at the possibility of that, and we was looking for federal funding, because bear in mind we've got to cross the North Para River, and that's not going to be an easy task because of the flood levels and all those things associated with it. The council of the day then walked away from those plans. They were shelved, and we looked at other alternatives as far as the freight route, and that's when the roundabout and the roundabout down here at Sebblesfield Road and all those things come into play. So there was plans. There was very early in our freight route proposal, that was an option, but it was then walked away from simply because of the costs. And since then, as I said, the site has changed dramatically to what it is today. So that's the question. Those plans were become obsolete.
Question?
So just to add, Mr Mayor, the purpose of this would be to actually draw up the sorts of things you're asking about, Councillor Priest, as well. Excuse me, please. There would have to be actually a formal report. This is just starting a process to actually look at the sorts of things you're asking, heavy vehicle movements, how it would work.
Another question?
I think it's me again. I pushed the button, sorry. Okay,
My question was around the road surface level. Like, will that will be impacted with extra traffic use, and has that been taken into account that we're going to have to increase the level of? Is that what it's called? No. Okay. Thank you.
CEO?
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you. That's already a heavy vehicle road dealing with a heavy vehicle transport training, so there is unlikely to be much impact on the road surface level.
Councillor Green?
thank you, Worship. I was not overly concerned with the extension of Old Mill Road across the floodplain, but just so that I'm clear, when I was leafleting, I seem to remember, and this is a question for Mr Mavrinac, if we were to run the Old Mill Road across the floodplain, wouldn't we be right in the middle of new developments? And I think there are areas there that are proposed. I may be wrong. I'm asking a question. So, Mr Mavrinac, what's on the other side of the river?
I've turned mine off now.
Through the Chair, that area is identified for growth north of where Mills Road is, and there's no planned growth south of it at this stage.
So if there was a road to go across the floodplain, river, call it what you will, there would be space on the other side for the road to continue. So I guess that's what I mean.
There is a road reserve identified, so it would be built along that road reserve.
And would that be in the middle of development?
No, it would be actually on the southern boundary of development.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Ask your airport pumps, just going to say.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a floodplain. It's also a floodplain. No further questions?
Oh.
Question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how semi-trailers would turn on that if they weren't going to go into the premises as a former semi-driver. And I know the driving school park their vehicles there now, but the road's not wide enough to do a UE on a semi-trailer. So are they contemplating doing the UEs in that large triangular area?
That will all be explored if you allow the designs to be done.
Just one question.
Is there an increase of traffic, or is this, turned it off, didn't I? Is there an increase of traffic? I was under the impression that for driving lessons, there was always trucks sort of turning around in there anyway. So are we looking at an increase, or is it just the same amount of traffic trucks that are already doing U-turns in there?
Through you again, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Troop. That I can't answer until I do the assessment. The general gist, however, is that the current leaseholders of that premises will be vacating, and they will essentially be replacing like for like in terms of utilisation of the facility. But this is a preliminary. Do council want to think about it? And a lot of those things will come through to the design phase.
If we're finished with questions, I'm happy to move the recommendation, and I'm happy to give my reasons for that.
Moved Councillor De Vries. Seconded Councillor Thompson. Councillor De Vries.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I think on the face of it this will work. I was concerned primarily about whether or not we would still have access to that road in case I'm less inclined to think we'll go across the river, but I do think that it's possible we would want access to the parklands on the southern end. But if the road is not in fact being surrendered as such, then I don't see a concern. In terms of the trucks turning, well, they're turning now, so I don't see how that is going to be a problem going forward. The point is, I think this idea has merit. If there are problems, and clearly there are a lot of questions that this council has about this, I think that it's even more reason to explore it, to find out exactly what it is that we are going to either support or reject. If we were to reject it without doing the work, I think we would be rejecting something in ignorance. So given that we are all asking questions, I think it makes a lot of sense for the CEO to take this to the next level. And then if it turns out that his answers are not satisfactory to our liking, then we can reject it down the path.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor De Vries in that we give them the opportunity to present their report so that we can explore the possibilities further, and if it does come out that it can benefit our heritage and community without affecting further growth in the town, I think it's a good opportunity to have a look at it anyway.
Any further comments? Councillor Angus.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to support this motion on the grounds that we do understand that while the motion is proposing to close a portion of that road, I don't want us to be regretting in 10, 15, 20 years' time that we don't have thoroughfare as an alternate entry, because it makes very good sense to be an alternate entrance to Newry. Instead of Gawler Street or Greenock Road. The wording is pretty specific. We're talking about road closures, or the Opening and Closure Act, disposal of land and other assets. So I just don't want to make sure we're not, that we leave ourselves the option to put a road through there if we need to. There's plenty of roads that go through floodplains, so don't let the fact that it's a creek say it'll never ever happen, because it happens all over the world.
Any other comments?
Look, I agree wholeheartedly with the councillor here of what he said, and I think that a lot of times you see councils and state governments and federal governments do something, and then later on they regret what they've done in 10 or 15 or 20 years' time. And I think that if we allow this to go ahead, we'll regret it in 20 years' time. And as a former councillor said to me, and he was on council for a long time, I think there were plans actually drawn up for that to be a route through to Sturt Highway, I think he said, instead of people going down Old Greenock Road, as a new road for that section. And so I think I'll be voting against this, and even to go forward as it is now, I'll be voting against it. But I echo everything that Councillor Angus has said.
I'll just clarify, there was never plans drawn up, not detailed plans. It was a concept plan only. Any further comments?
Yes, I agree with Councillor Angus as well. I am concerned that this recommendation will take us to a point of no return. If it's just doing the preliminaries, then should we alter the recommendation to echo that, or are we taking this into the point of no return? That's my question.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Schilling. We could add to the way that the Roads Opening and Closing Act works is there are multiple steps which council actually have to approve, otherwise you don't pass from point A to point B to point C to point D. There are basically 4 steps. You could put in there that council is subject to receiving further technical information, support the blah, 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 if you want to protect that position. And I can go back to Tarek and say, we would like to see some designs before we actually trigger anything.
As the mover of the motion, I'm happy to have that.
Variation.
Yep.
Would that satisfy you, Councillor Frew?
Councillor Hearn.
Yes, I'm echoing Councillor Priest and Councillor Schilling's comments. I am concerned if there's a way of us just using that one little bit, that it's not a road closure at all, it's the selling off of part of that southern side. I'd be more than happy with that, but if not, then I'll be voting against it if we don't get something in concrete, because I think once we make that step forward, suddenly if that road is closed, Viv Fiebiger was one representing several people in that same area, saying that he's asking council to look at another road out of Neurupa from that side. And there's plenty of people coming from Angaston, etc., that wouldn't even need to go into the town if they were bypassing along that road. So it is something that could seriously be considered in the foreseeable future.
I think the CEO's put a whole point in that now, which has been accepted by the mover and the seconder. So if we could put that up and just contemplate that, Mr. CEO.
Just to be very clear, in the meeting that I had with Jeremy, he is very, very clear that we're not going to be giving the road. Only a very small portion of it is the only bit that we would consider. The reality is we need it right now for the access to the existing infrastructure that sits on Tolly Reserve. So,
Just that's the process that has to be followed. That's the act. And I can tell you, many years ago, they were looking to purchase the whole road, but that never ever flew with the council either. So.
to receiving detailed design, that's all it needs to be. So we have to.
Okay, we've got that now, and it's been accepted by the mover and the seconder. Would you like to speak to close the debate? There's no further comment, I think.
Yep.
I'll let you close the debate, Councillor DeVries.
Okay, just to make it very clear that what the position is, if you notice on page 93, which is the recommendation itself, it doesn't actually say to close the Old Mill Road, it says to close in regard to the closure of, and it really should read, a portion of Old Mill Road. Okay, yes. So that is key. It is a portion of Old Mill Road. This is why I asked the question at the beginning what section of road we were talking about, and if you turn to page 97, you will see that that is the purple area, which is basically a loading canopy area. So the road itself will still remain. The access points will still be there. As a result, I think that I want to see the vitality and the economic health of Neurupa maintained. This council is struggling this area is struggling at the moment because of impacts economically as a result of China. And anything that we can do to assist businesses, if it does not create any detriment towards the wider community, and I'm convinced that this won't. However, we still have the safeguard that there are, as the CEO has said, a number of different steps that we need to go through. I think that we should not be shutting down the opportunity for a business to become viable in the Barossa until we have explored every possible opportunity.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. 7.1.5 is a request for additional funding for the Gawler River Floodplain Management Authority. It's a business case and associated floodplain management plan on page 98. Any questions?
Thank you. I have a question. I understand the recommendations that have been put forward around balancing the obligations that we have to ratepayers within the Barossa Council region, and that the request for funding is essentially to address projects which are outside of our council area. My question is whether, reading between the lines, is there a sense that there is a deficiency in the works that have been undertaken to date, or is there some broader reason why we would not be investing in that? And I suppose the context for that question is that these impacts will continue and they are going to continue to get worse, and the impacts of climate change don't stop at a council boundary. And so what is the balancing that happens around continuing to invest in these sort of mitigation strategies? And is it a sense that the authority which is requesting the funding has perhaps not been able to meet the challenges of this particular change that's happening?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Gravich. I guess the very simple way for me to talk about that at the moment is because I'm only new to the board, but that in essence there was a scope of work to be done. That scope of works has grown in terms of this particular issue, and that scope of works clearly has no benefit or return for the ratepayer of the Barossa Council.
Yeah.
It certainly does not mean that we will not continue to support the commitments that we've made. And as outlined in the report, I think it's time to review all of those things to which you're alluding to in your question, and to what the benefits are, what the risks are, and how we balance that up, noting that this authority is now 20 odd years old. It has done its initial, and what we would say with the prior council, of course this council may have a different outcome and a different view, what is our true role in that, and what is equitable. So what is equitable at the moment, as I see it, is not the system in which we have set up. And I cannot see, and this is an argument that I know the Mayor has put many, many times, because I keep giving him the notes to put the part of the argument, is where is that fair line? Because at the moment, the reality is all of this work will be slightly above, potentially, the Bruce Expeak Dam and all downstream. Do we have a responsibility for undertaking reasonable mitigation of flood in our region? Yes, but where does that start and stop? Yeah. That's the argument that I'm saying here, and I think it's time to review it.
Okay. The reason that I asked the question, if I could ask a follow-up question, is if that's appropriate, is whether we felt that the recommendation number 2 accurately reflected that the instruction to prepare an options paper regarding the council's involvement, or whether it's around actually assessing that on a more broader scale, as I think that you've just alluded to in your answer. There might be some refinement that could happen there, that it doesn't just look that we're considering a binary pulling out or remaining in, but in fact considering it at a more holistic approach.
So through you, Mr Mayor, certainly the intent is to look at the holistic approach. The trigger is this particular point, the threat that it potentially has to our long-term financial plans, and the fact that the GRFMA strategy may no longer be aligned to what is fair, reasonable and equitable for this community.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Price?
Through the Chair, question to the Chief Executive Officer. Is it true that I'm led to believe that we've spent many, many millions of dollars up our end and that has not been taken into consideration by the GMRA?
Through you, Mr Mayor. It's not considered by the GRFMA because it was never captured within the context of the GRFMA at the time. Part of the arguments that I certainly have put forward at my level, and I know that we've put forward at other levels at the board, is that the GRFMA is meant to manage a riverine system. The riverine system, and certainly recently through the last generation of the last 4 years, the last fluctuation of time over the last 4 years with its reviews, has come up with some charging regimes and activities that allude to that we have a large amount, and I will get there, but a large amount of the riverine system, that is the Gawler River system. Now that has some significant impacts on the potential costs that this community will necessarily have to pay under that arrangement. So our counter-argument to that has been we have made significant investments, especially since 1983 as a council, into many, many towns. The majority of it at this point has been in the likes of Angaston, Talunda, Newry, a little bit more in some in Williamstown, some in Lindau. We've still got significant amount of works to do in some of those areas. And, you know, the counter for that is, well, there should be an equitable distribution of those costs over time as well. Whether we want GRFMA to look after our infrastructure, that's a very different question. But GRFMA, to be clear, was not established for that purpose at that time. What my argument has been is to be equitable over the multiple generations that can look after the hundreds of years of these assets. There needs to be a different model.
I'm happy to move the recommendation if there's nobody with any other questions.
No other questions?
And I'm more than happy to talk to this one.
Okay.
Moved Councillor De Vries and seconded Councillor Schilling. Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, I just want to put some historical context to this. I'm sure Councillor Angus knows almost word for word what I'm about to say. The reality is this council was almost coerced into this. We did not want to be a part of it at the beginning. We actually sought legal advice and were told that if we did not, there was a potential, the word was potential, that we could then be liable for water that went downriver. But we were assured by the state government and by everybody involved in the proposal that if we built this dam and played our part in it, that would be it. We would not have to then shell out a single extra red cent, and that has clearly not been the case, and that just goes on and on and on. I think they have breached the faith with us many times. I was on this committee at one point. They were talking about building a second dam further upriver so that because it was regarded that for the benefit of the greater region, that if there was a flooding, then it would be best if we flooded part of Rosedale, and that was considered to be an acceptable thing. And I said, so basically you want us to flood our own town to prevent flooding downriver? You are out of your minds. Meanwhile, they continue to build on floodplains where they know they are floodplains, and they also, we've even seen situations where levees have been deliberately knocked down, or so that water can run into the. So I'm sorry. I think the moral high ground from downriver is pretty weak. They have been putting their hand out for years for us to pay for their mistakes, and I believe their mismanagement. And I think enough is enough. And I agree with the CEO. I wanted to be out of this group for a very long time, and I've made that very public. Equity in this is not even close. We are spending all our money up at our end trying to do the right thing, and I keep saying this, and I'll continue to say it, that when it's bad water, in other words, when it floods, it's our water. But when we want it, no, you can't have it. So we're not allowed to harvest that water. We have to send it downriver unless it's a flood, in which case then we have to pay for the damage it causes. I think that is completely wrong, and I do believe that a more equitable system needs to come into place. We're treating the water at the moment as a liability rather than an asset, and that is just insane in this country.
The answer to my question. Thank you.
Councillor Schilling, you. I'll let Councillor Schilling speak as the second. You need to turn your mic off.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, early in my first term on council, I was lucky enough to join a day trip down through the Gawler River area, which was very enlightening to see what's happening to the land of our neighbours downstream. So I have no problems in supporting this recommendation, because we are doing our bit, as you said, Councillor De Vries, and it's time for our neighbours downstream to take control of their bit.
Thank you very much. I absolutely support Councillor De Vries'
Councillor Angus, Councillor Greatwich and Councillor Schilling. I think I've got everyone. So apologies if I've missed somebody with this. And I think that's a very valid points have been made here. And looking at our own region and our own waterways and river systems elsewhere and looking forward for a sustainable future and some of the other matters in this agenda, I think we've got plenty of resources that require support, perhaps potentially for other detailed business cases along the track for our own region as well. So thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I think it's my turn. Councillor De Vries is correct. I was going to have a lot to say, but I wasn't as quick on the uptake. But I will endorse everything he has said about this subject. And the fact is that development continues in that floodplain unabated. And like Councillor said, when the water goes down and does damage, it's bad water. When they want the water and it's good water, well, everyone wants it. Be interesting to see if the residents of Mannum or Swanreach or Morgan or Renmark are going to sue the councils or the water areas of Wentworth or Mildura or Moama or Albury. It just doesn't happen like that. So we've got to stop running scared. This is the right decision. We've come to the party 20 years ago, paid our dues. Let's let them deal with it.
Here.
Councillor Barrett.
Like other councillors have spoken before me today, I'll be supporting this motion. I come at it at a slightly different angle. In the late 90s, I was a police officer at Elizabeth Police Station when some floods went through that area, because my area extended up 2 wells and north. And I remember vividly standing out there in my uniform with water lapping up around my knees and looking at levee banks built in totally wrong places, water going where it shouldn't be, and the lack of control of the water. So I would like to see the people who've got responsibility downstream to actually take some responsibility downstream. That's all I've got to say on the matter.
Other comments? Do you wish to close the debate, Councillor?
I think that would be overcooking it.
Yeah, and I've been around a long time. I think you've said it all well, so I think I'll put the motion. Thank you. All those in favour? Carried. Councillors, we move to 7.1.6, which is the sister city relationship with Grapevine, Texas, on page 107. I will declare a conflict because there's obviously some material benefit there for me if you choose to go that way. So I will vacate the chamber and ask the Deputy Mayor to handle this report. Thank you.
Okay. Well. Okay. Just so everybody knows, I don't get a vote in this.
Not unless it's tied.
If it's tied, but we don't have an even number because I've broken the tie by leaving my chair. So I don't vote. Cool. All right. With that in mind, but I am allowed to give my views on this one.
No, you're essentially the mayor.
So I can't offer a position?
You can't. No, not technically, no.
Okay. I can give background.
Yes.
Okay. I'll be very cautious. Just to give you background on this, this is a relationship that has been developed on the cards for probably something like about 5 years now.
It's nearly 8.
Nearly 8 years. So the previous council, just so the new councillors are aware of this, were heading in this direction. So this is not just something that just popped out of the blue from nowhere. This is something that has been built up on over a period of time. So that's probably everything else is in the report. So first off, we'll start with questions. Does anybody have any questions that they wish to ask? Councillor Priest.
Yeah, I'm just worried about the costs of this. It says in there every few years or whatever, I mean, and then there's a cost of, I can't see how it's $10,000 to bring someone here that we have to pay, but when our mayor goes, it's $20,000, so I don't understand the difference in the money, and it doesn't say how long he goes for. It does? You're saying it does? No, it doesn't. It doesn't say how long he's going to be away for. And it just keeps on going on and on and on. And I think that the Barossa wine group goes to it, and I think that they do a pretty good job at doing what they do best. And I don't think there's any need for the mayor to go unless he wants to pay for it out of his own pocket.
Okay, so what is your question?
The question is what's the total cost, and also it says it's every couple of years, but that really doesn't mean anything. It could be 1 year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years.
Okay, CEO. Yep.
Thanks, Mr Deputy Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Priest. The initial cost is for a visit each way, and any future costs would still need to come back through council for an approval. So all you're approving is the initial. And obviously at the moment all you're approving is a concept, because we need to bring back an agreement at some point as well. So it's a ballpark. The cost of around $10,000 was just hosting an event, probably not even that much. And if we do allow BIM to travel on council's cost, that is accommodation, flights, for no more than normally a week or so. So the event runs for about 5 days. 5 days in Grapevine in September, and it would be to attend that purpose. That's so far a ballpark. I haven't costed it. X amount's going to be 3,000 in flights and this and this and this and this. So, and yes, the mayor has offered to pay himself.
So when Councillor Priest was talking about why are we paying when they come here and why are we paying when they go there, they would be, as I understand what you just said, they would be different costs. So, for example, when we're hosting someone, we would not pay for their accommodation or their airfares. They would cover that themselves. But we would put on whatever we put on as hosts. But when we go over there, whether it's the mayor or somebody else, in those circumstances, we would pay for the accommodation and the airfares, but they would put on whatever the events were at the other end. Does that answer the question? Okay. Did you have a follow-up question, Councillor Priest?
$20,000 seems an awful lot for 5 days. I've been to the States heaps and heaps of times, and $20,000, I could spend that in a whole year.
Once again, was that a question or a comment?
Question.
So what was the question, sorry?
It's probably a bit high, I agree, but I haven't costed it out. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Councillor Hand?
Yeah, now we're right. Have we got any costings on the benefits of these sister cities? Because this has happened in previous councils and we don't ever seem to see the runs at the end of the game. And I'm just concerned that we've got lots of things on the agenda these days, and whether we're biting off more than we need to chew.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. The costs that are estimated there are absolute ballparks, so, and it wouldn't actually increase the budget, because at the moment there's certain allocations made for civic events, et cetera, that are rarely used. The benefit, it is hard to put a tangible benefit on some of these agreements. As I outlined in the report, the main agreement we've always had is with, it's just gone out of my head, Japan. Yeah, that's the main one. And there were two in China. The China ones aren't actually sister city arrangements. They're just what they call economic friendship, but they're useless now. The benefit is actually trying to open up trade, and certainly the likes of America is a significant market and a market strategy for the wine industry. And the capacity that grapevine has, and I think there is value in this one, hence obviously why I've put it here, is they have a very similar story to us that we can learn from, and a lot of that will be done on Microsoft Teams at 4 o'clock in the morning between the timeframes, with the odd visit. Do I think there is value in having a cooperation between our industries and their industries and our government and their government? Absolutely. Do I think we should get in? Absolutely, because if I don't, somebody else is going to. So they want somebody in Australia and they have knocked on our door. That's the opportunity cost in the situation.
Yeah, and you asked the benefits, and these were brought out when various representatives from Grapevine came over here. Yes, Barossa Australia could maintain the very healthy relationship that they have with them, but there's a huge difference between an instrument of the council or of the area operating with a wine region and the councils themselves forming a sister city relationship. This is one of the major wine festivals. I think it is the major wine festival in Texas, and they have featured the Barossa on a number of occasions, including they're going to do that this year. The benefit to our wine industry is significant as a result of that. The state government has actually developed a very strong relationship with Texas. You probably are aware that Austin, the capital of Texas, is the sister city of Adelaide, and they actually had a delegation, I think it was about 3 years ago. Councillor Greatwich nodding there, where various different groups from various different industries went over to Texas, and one of them was Barossa Australia going over to relate with Grapevine. They have other sister city relationships around the world, so in a way we get a 3-for-1 with this. And as the CEO pointed out, the other issue of benefit is that if we don't do it, they're going to then go to someone else, and it may be that they'll then reach out to McLaren Vale or another wine region, and I think that would be to the Barossa's detriment. So those are the reasons why I think, from what I've been hearing, the benefits behind it. Are there any other questions?
Don.
Sorry?
Don.
Oh, Barrett, sorry, Councillor Barrett. I don't have it on my... Councillor Barrett.
Can I make comment rather than question?
Not at this stage, no. This is for questions.
I'll pass to someone else then.
Okay. Councillor Priest, did you have a question?
This is through the chair to the CEO. Doesn't the state government already have an office there, and doesn't the wine group go over there and fill that void that you're saying won't happen if we don't go? But the Barossa Wine Group is already going, I'm led to believe, through the chair.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. The Barossa Wine Group is invited along with the Barossa Council to create the relationship, correct? The state government has a trade representation in Houston, and it has a sister city relationship with Austin, not with Grapevine. Grapevine is obviously a county that has that large wine industry and is an avenue into the industry, and it is, you are correct, it is supported by Barossa Australia, and they have been invited, this will be the third time, and to present as the wine area of choice. Whether they get invited in future, I can't comment on that.
Councillor Angus.
Deputy Mayor, if it's okay with you, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Before you do so, Councillor Greatwich, did you have a question?
Sorry, I was actually hoping to move the recommendation, but to make some commentary.
Sorry? Councillor Evans, did you have a question?
Oh, look, at the risk of repetition, my question was, what is the longevity of this relationship proposal? please?
I think it's definite, isn't it?
Potential.
Yeah.
That was the feeling I had. I just needed to check. Thank you. Okay, so
Sort of the reality is you get what you put in to an extent through you, Mr Deputy Chair. Now, some of those have lasted some years with this organisation. Some haven't. But for instance, the agreements that we've had with Pingley and Lozu, is it? Lujar, that's right. They lasted 18 months. So, yeah.
That could be dusted off if China loves it.
So, yes, subject to third party. Yeah. And I suppose... Am I on? Yes. Okay. Yes, that was just what I was wondering. So I suppose subject to confirmation of costings and things like that, which could change over time. As you said, is this a proposal that needs to be continually authorised by council as it progresses forward? And this is just for the first few visits. Is this correct, or is that what you said earlier?
No, this is essentially to say we're in.
Yes.
And they are presenting a similar. Sorry, through you, Mr Deputy Mayor. They are presenting a similar paper to their council.
Yes.
And then if both councils agree, we have to come up with an agreement.
Okay.
And that agreement normally has an exit clause to some extent as well,
yes,
if we feel not getting anywhere.
Always.
Any travel will always need to be authorised by the council because it's way over delegations.
Yes.
So any travel would always need to be a separate report.
And there was proposed that the expenses will come out of the elected members' training and development budget, is that correct? And there's plenty of wiggle room. Oh, I shouldn't use that term, sorry.
Correct.
Plenty of leeway, yep.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Greatwich,
Well,
did you have a question? Or
no, I was hoping to move the motion and to speak to it.
Okay, is there anyone else who wants to ask a question? All right, then go ahead.
So I'm happy to move this recommendation, and also, do we need a seconder before I can speak to it?
What we usually do is we get a mover and a seconder, and then if there's nobody who wishes to talk against it, then often the mover doesn't bother, but the mover can then talk to it after it's been seconded. I take that you're seconding. Okay, Councillor Greatwich, do you wish to?
Thank you.
to move?
Notwithstanding that I don't think that there's vociferous opposition to it, I think it's just important to provide a little bit of context for the benefit of people that may not have been involved in the wine industry over a long period of time. And that's been really, I think, amply illustrated by some of the commentary around this, quote, sister city arrangements that we have in China, and we're all aware of the volatility of that relationship. But I think it's quite important to note that the American market has been critically important for Barossa winemakers for a very long period of time now, and there would be an argument to make that the second wave of winemaking that really established the Barossa internationally was off the back of the quote-unquote Parkerisation of the Australian wine industry, which came out of the United States market. Southern America and Texas in particular is a very lucrative market for travelling Barossa winemakers, and I think that this proposal allows us to cement that that relationship strongly and appropriately. It is correct that Barossa Australia attend these activations and festivals already. However, I think having layers to that relationship is a means by which cementing it into the future is a really wise thing to do. I think it's worth noting as well that in terms of that market, there's a great deal of cultural similarity in Australia and in the United States as well, and it doesn't lend us, or it doesn't leave us open to that same degree of volatility of a relationship as we have had with other very significant markets for our wine internationally, and that's been amply demonstrated in recent years. So I think that broader understanding of the economic context of the relationship between the southern United States as a wine market for Barossa winemakers is an important addition to the conversation this evening.
Councillor Angus.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I will endorse everything that Councillor Greatwich has said in seconding this. It's the way business is done more often than not in this day and age. And if it doesn't suit, we can back out, we can let it go cold. It doesn't have to cost us an arm and a leg, but if nothing ventured, nothing gained. I'd urge you to support it.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Barrett.
I listened to a lot of the arguments people have put forward, and whilst I totally agree with them, I'll just put on the record that I will be voting against this. It's nothing against the Mayor that I don't want to see miss out on a trip overseas. I've done quite a bit of reading, and I've got some philosophical reasons for voting against this. This promotes the Barossa. I live in Mount Pleasant. I'll have to go back to my township in Mount Pleasant, and Mount Pleasant won't be promoted at all. I live outside, and the people in Mount Pleasant live outside the Barossa GI. We are in the Adelaide Hills wine region down there. We've got 2 vignerons, and they're not going to get promoted through this process. So that lets you know why I won't be voting in favour. I've got nothing against it. I think there's some good ideas for it. It's just I have to go back and explain to people down my area whilst I voted in favour of it, and for no benefit for the bottom end of the council area. But what I did note though is, and there's some tremendous benefits I can see for it, when I see that Texas got a population bigger than Australia at 29.5 mil, and just throughout this state of Texas, they've got 215 sister city relationships throughout the world. So the Americans are fantastic on the sister city relationships, but for philosophical reasons, for where I live, and because we're in the Adelaide Hills GI, I won't be voting in favour of it.
Councillor Troop.
I'd just like to note that I've just as I was exploring the website, that already there is wine experience. They're promoting us already because there's wine experiences from the Barossa Valley Australian wine experience. I mean, I think that I will be supporting this as well because I think they're already partnering with us anyway, and I think that it's a great sister city relationship. So that's where I'll be standing on this.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? I would just like to make a comment, Councillor Barrett. We're all one Barossa, and we will be supporting Mount Pleasant, and I'm sure they will also see Mount Pleasant as a very important part of the Barossa. This is between councils, not between wine regions. Are there any other comments? All right, in that case, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Those opposed? Okay, the motion is carried.
Janine, just why don't the numbers tie up here inside? They're one out.
Sorry.
Oh, well, this one ends in 1 and the others are 2.
Because it's the next section of the agenda.
Sorry?
It's the next section of the agenda.
Oh, no, they're all 1 out.
Minutes are always formatted after the meetings as well.
And that was approved, Your Worship.
Sorry, you meant up here?
Oh, we on the side here, they're different from the actual numbers on the...
I just have to have a look after.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We'll move on to 7.2.1 is the Child and Vulnerability Persons Safe Environments Policy on page 118. Any questions?
I'll second that.
Moved Councillor Barrett, seconded Councillor Thompson. Either one wish to speak to it?
No, it's all self-evident and tidy up after further work on it.
No comments? All those in favour? Carried. Seven 7.3.1 is the community grant application, Mount Pleasant Men's Shed. Any questions?
I just want to give some background to this as the chair, but maybe if they wanted to ask questions first.
Yeah, I'll take questions first.
Before we start, can I declare a conflict? Yes. Thank you. Before we start, I have a general conflict of interest, not a material. I was a former public officer of that particular body. I was also a former secretary. I currently hold no positions of authority within the organisation. I have got nothing to gain. So at this stage, unless anything material comes up during the debate on this matter, I intend on staying within the council chamber and voting accordingly.
Thank you, councillor. No further questions?
Thank you.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you. I read this with some interest around some of the rationale being given for the potential recommendation to decline the grant being that the sheds already exist, and so therefore it appears that funding was able to be sourced from some other source. There's also a couple of other points there around the application being substantially late and perhaps deficient on a couple of other matters. I just wondered whether we had gone back to them to seek some clarification on, was it the case that the funds have been borrowed on the assumption that they will receive the grant? Was there some particular reason why the paperwork was lodged late? I mean, it seems to me on the face of it that this is a deficient application for funding that's been lodged outside of the appropriate time and without full documentation. Have we given them the option to clarify some of those matters, and if so, what did they say?
This is where my background might help.
Okay.
Yeah. So the backstory to this is as follows. When I first became deputy mayor, one of the first duties, in fact, it was the first duty I did, was to go down and open a Queen's Jubilee avenue of trees that have been planted. They showed me around the men's shed. I'm a big fan of men's sheds. I think that they're vital for mental health and community wellbeing. There's so many reasons why I'm a big fan of them. This group have done the vast majority of their work themselves. They have applied for many grants outside of the council. They're not people who stand there with their hand out. They're basically very self-sufficient. During the course of the tour, I guess, I was shown a new building which had been established. It's basically just the metal frame and the metal skin. That's all. It's not sealed, it's not the doors, there's no doors, windows, interior, no electrics. So to say that this is, that the job has already been begun is not really accurate. It's sort of technically true, but basically this was all donated and they put it up themselves, and the idea was then that they were going to fit it out and do so. So they were not applying for the whole shed. This is a little bit like if I was saying I'd like to apply for some furnishings and you say, oh, but you've already built the house. When I actually saw what they were doing, they then pointed out that what they wanted to do was lay a concrete slab and put in the electrics and so forth, and that obviously this was going to cost a lot of money. They explained the purpose of this metal shed was that you can't do metal work in a wood shed environment because of sparks and, airborne sawdust and so forth. And this was also something that was going to be used by the wider community, including the youth of the area. So I thought this was actually a really good proposal, and so I actually suggested to them that because we had the community assistance scheme, that maybe they should apply and recommended that they do so, knowing that we had a new scheme coming up later that month. And I asked the Mayor and the CEO, would this be appropriate? And they said, yes, technically you could get it in time. When this actually came to the Community Assistance Committee, we all agreed that this was something that we wanted to support. We have a cap of $5,000. So what we did, and it sounds like we did it in error, but we approved the $5,000 and then recommended to the council that we top up, that the council would then top up the additional $5,000. When I read this recommendation, I spoke to the CEO about it. He said that actually technically the way it was worded, we couldn't do that. So we acted in error as a result. But the spirit of that committee was that we wanted we wanted at the very minimum to give them the $5,000, with the assumption and the hope that the council would then want to see the merits of this and then provide the additional $5,000. So that's the background behind it. So in fairness to the group, I think they were given a very short amount of time apply. It wasn't through tardiness on their behalf. I suggested that we would help them put together the report. They got it in at literally 5 minutes to 5 on the day of the cut-off, and I think they've done everything that they can to do this. So I think all the information that we need they've actually provided.
Thank you. That answers my follow-up question as well.
Councillor Hearn.
Thanks, Mayor. We haven't put the motion at this stage.
No, it's a question.
No, I'd like to put the recommendation on page 131 that we approve the 10,000 and et cetera, et cetera.
I just want to see...
Unless there's other questions.
Yeah, I do. Just a point of order, Mayor, I'd like to raise. It seems like before questions have been, before you ask, is there any more questions or is there still questions being answered? Seems like councillors are asking a question, then they'll jump in and say, look, I want to move the motion without you going through the chair, the proper way of the chair saying, is there any more questions? If there's no questions, then I'll ask for a mover and a seconder. It seems like there are councillors who are just jumping in before you're asking that question. But that was my point of order. Okay. I'm in favour of the money being allocated to the men's shed. I think I agree with Councillor De Veers that... no, I was just going to be in favour of knocking back this.
I stopped Councillor Hearn from he was going to move the motion, so I was doing questions. So, Councillor Hearn, any further questions?
Sorry, yes, I do have a further question.
Thank you.
My question is, how frequently does it happen that grants that the figures are requested that are outside or above that cap of the $5,000, how frequently does it occur that the recommendation is that they receive that higher amount? Is that a frequent thing, and is there a process in place to kind of assess that, or is it just sort of an ad hoc decision-making process that happens on a case-by-case basis?
I think it's time we reviewed the operations of the community grant application process. Yeah, I'll hand over to the CEO, but that's my personal view.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thanks, Councillor Growich. It is rare. The original, some years ago, it was only 2 years ago, it was only 3,000. So the odd one would ask for 5 to come up. Most will adjust knowing that the application is up to $3,000, but there has been a few that have gone through. And the only procedural error in this process, and as officers we need to recommend as we did, but that's why we put the alternative recommendation, is that once the application is over the threshold for the delegation of the committee can only make a recommendation to the council. That's the only step. So that's what this particular step is. So the council, it's all assessed the same way by the officers, as you can see by the documentation. And time was of the essence with this particular one because of the poor, I think it was. So it's not, there's no hard and fast rule that it has to be in those particular dates, but we obviously try to run them within, for administrative purposes, within 3 rotations. Because it's much more efficient to do it one in that fashion rather than having them come through, drill them. And to further on the Mayor's comment, the previous council has asked for a review of the community assistance scheme. An original piece of work has been done, and there is more being done, hopefully to come back to council in the near future.
Councillor Priest.
Yeah, a question through to the CEO and to the Mayor. Has this already been passed by a body who gives community grants? They've already passed this and given consent, so there must be merit in that, is that correct?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Priest. So, as I said, all that the committee can do is do the recommendation to the council because it's over its delegation. So, yes, as the report outlines, the committee has supported the application, yes.
Councillor Shelley.
Yes, having been a member of the CAS committee, if this recommendation of the $10,000 doesn't get approved tonight, does that mean that the $5,000 from the CAS committee will still hold? And they will, so that has been discounted and this is the only...
So the very simple way to think about it is there are certain powers that have been provided to that committee. That committee can only go up to that certain power. Once it goes past that power, it's what's called ultra vires, it's beyond its powers, and it means nothing.
Question, Councillor DeVries.
No, I was just going to point out that, yeah, oh, sorry, really.
Yes, as I said before, we were in error. That was my mistake. I thought that we were allowed to go up to the 5 and then recommend an additional 5. It turns out that, yeah, and that was my understanding of the process. It turns out that was not in fact correct. So we were not even allowed to do that. Yeah, so.
Any further questions? Councillor Hearn, you was...
Thank you, Mayor. It's a very good debate tonight, and I think there's more in line. But yes, I'd like to move the motion that's on page 131 on my machine. Is that the one? Yes, that's the one. I'd like to move that motion.
So Reid, you are moving the alternate motion? Oh, Councillor Hearn, sorry. Councillor Priest.
Yeah, I'd like to second that motion.
So it's moved Councillor Hearn, seconded Councillor Priest. You would like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I think Councillor DeVries said everything that I could have said and a lot more, because you're first hand out there on that particular day. I think they're a worthwhile group and everything else, and we should continue to support them despite the little technicality that we've had this evening.
Through the chair, no, I think enough's been said.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. (7.4.1) is the stormwater upgrade works, 18A Elizabeth Street, Tanunda, on page 162. Any questions?
Councillor Greatwich.
Thank you. I'm very fortunate to live on beautiful Elizabeth Street, so I took a little wander down and had a look at this. My question is around the recommendation here is to approve additional capital expenditure to remove that vegetation and the longevity of that outcome. So whether that's sort of considered to be a temporary measure or how long-term that mitigation will be, and what responsibility then falls to the homeowner in the future. It seems to me to be I'd love a little bit more detail around the cost, because when I walked around I thought, I could get my kids to rip that out. But I'd love to just have a little bit more of a sense of how much of a long-term solution that might be.
Through you, Mr Chair. Thanks, Councillor. I'll let Mr Clark talk about the longevity. The 30,000 is for the side entry pit and the vegetation removal. The vegetation removal was a catch-up. The only reason it's capital for that component is there's a lovely little thing in accounting standards says that it does still allow us to capitalise that lesser piece of work, but the side entry pit is the significant expenditure. And if your children would like to go in, just make sure they please wear high vis and register as volunteers.
We would be delighted if you'd like an intern for the day.
You finished?
Please.
Yeah, okay. Just this seems to be an ongoing problem. So what's the end game of this? Does the landowner know when they bought the property that this was an ongoing issue? And so why is council paying for this then? Should not the landowner pay for this? And these are all questions.
I'll start that one if you like, Mr Mayor. To my knowledge, the landowner absolutely knows, because it is an easement registered on his property. With some of the properties we have an easement for this purpose, many of the properties we don't. There are statutory easements that potentially can apply, and consistently through that area it has been an open drain, but it needs to be maintained. It is fair and reasonable, in my view, to undertake that maintenance. The maintenance of the vegetation is not a significant expenditure. It's the side entry pit. The side entry pit does need to be increased. I'll let Mr Clark talk about the engineering.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So the additional funds is to clear the vegetation and then make sure that the drainage is going to flow suitably. So there needs to be some rock lining to mitigate any erosion. There's stormwater pipe drainage that comes into that easement. So it's making sure that's all going to be able to be upheld over a long period of time. And it's a bit of catch-up work, so then we can take on the maintenance to kind of keep it in check in perpetuity post that. But it's really a catch-up exercise on top of the side entry pit works that needs to be undertaken to increase capacity.
Yes, Mr Clark. From memory, isn't that largely rock-lined already?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yeah, there's a significant piece of it that is already rock-lined. It'll be just making sure that's all still formed appropriately and that the drainage isn't causing any erosion post-clean-up.
I'm happy to move the motion once the...
Is there any further questions?
Move Councillor De Vries. Seconded Councillor Hearn. You like to speak to the motion, Councillor De Vries?
Yeah, this used to be on my regular morning walk, and I remember when before the property before it was actually partitioned. It was a damn shame when they carved it up. I think they devalued the main house significantly as a result. But this is almost like a little dry creek, which was rock-lined. It was quite picturesque. And anybody who purchased that land and did not know that it was there would have been blind. I actually thought it was actually a feature of the property for what it's worth. So, yes, I agree with Councillor Priest. You know, when people purchase land, they purchase it with knowledge. I think we do have an onus to maintain it to the level that it was at when they purchased the land, but to increase the service level. If we do this, I think we will. I could think of at least 3 or 4 other people straight away in Tanunda who would be saying, "Oh, well, if you get that, then we'd like it too." And I'm sure it wouldn't stop from there. So I think we'd be very cautious about increasing service levels for no reason.
Just trying to remember who seconded it.
Councillor Hearn.
Councillor Hearn, thank you.
I think Councillor De Vries once again has said it all.
Okay. Any further comments?
All those in favour? And those against? Carried. (7.4.2) Rogers Road, change to the level of service, classification, page 166. Any questions?
Yeah, look, I'm just about against this sort of changing of the road, and we're only going to partially fix it up. And what about future times when it might get developed and, you know, we're putting ourselves in a corner again? So I'll be against this. I don't think we should be doing it. I think we should keep up the road service of the road to a proper service level where cars can drive on and people can drive on and off their properties.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This is actually constructing the road to a land division that's already been approved. There's no constructed road there at the moment. It's just a basic access, and it's an old approval process.
Any further questions?
There's a recommendation there. Moved Councillor Hearn. Seconded Councillor De Vries. Councillor Hearn.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with the comments that are made by Councillor Priest, but I think we've got to look after the people out in the sticks, and having lived in the sticks previously, but not quite as far as this particular road, And I don't think it's a huge amount. And as the CEO pointed out, there's a property being developed in that particular area, and I think we should support that application.
I think Councillor Hearn said it very well.
Any other comments? Councillor Thompson, I believe, first.
So just to clarify, this is to amend the road to the service classification that it should be, is that? So we're really doing what has to be done in terms of our road surface requirements. Yep.
Through you, if I can add to that, the land division that has occurred there is highly unlikely to occur again because of the character preservation area. So this is a very old land division. I can't remember how many years ago. And unfortunately, every now and then this pops up where it then gets developed 10, 15 years later. There's no infrastructure agreement, 20 years old, so we've got no option but to give them access.
I think the background is that the previous owner of this property had an opportunity to use the adjoining owner's entrance, but that's been taken away from the new owner. So we're just giving them access to their own property, really, in a nutshell. Any further comments? Sorry. Councillor Barrett.
And then Councillor Evans.
Yeah, I'll keep my comments brief. I only had one concern in relation to this, and that was the collection of rubbish and whether a truck currently went past it. I've been assured by our Director of Works and Engineering that the people already take their rubbish bin up to a corner, so there's no impact upon the people there. They're already moving their rubbish to another location. As it's down my way, I've driven it many a time, and if you haven't got a four-wheel drive, it's not much fun in the winter, so I can understand why you'd want to reclassify it as an unmade road. You wouldn't want to spend a lot of money on that particular road for that 800 metres, so I'll be supporting the particular motion, and well done.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you. I also support the motion from all of the reasons put forward, but also for general heavy vehicle access and bushfire safety. Thank you.
Would the mover like to close the debate? Councillor Hearn.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's all been said, and there's lots of reasons, and the last one for Councillor Evans was really important. But no, I think it's all now been said, and I ask you to support the motion.
Thank you. All those in favour? Carried. Page 170, 7.4.3 is the proposed Barossa freight route amendments. Any questions? We have the recommendation there for those amendments to gain access to Penrose Quarry. There's no upgrades. Yep. Moved, Councillor Angus. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Freeze. Yes, question?
I do have a few questions. This freight route, what impact does it have on the community by increasing the heavy load? How many extra trucks, like B doubles and that, will be using the road? And is there any more costs involved to council? Especially about the extra trucks, will there be extra trucks using the road and damaging it?
Do you want me to start? Through you, Mr Mayor. So the reason they are moving up a step is because we've actually done significant investment over the last years. Number of trucks increasing. The actual reality of that is that's going to happen all the time from there on, because the transport requirements in Australia are significantly growing. But significant investments have been made in the last council to make things like the Stockwell Bridge safer, Carrara Hill wider, and also pavement repair in those areas. Hence, they meet the standard and they can be increased. It can increase the transport service level.
Through you, Mayor, and any oversize or over maths vehicles have to be approved anyway, don't they, by council? So that gives you control over the vehicles that are travelling on that road anyway.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's correct. Anything comes through the heavy vehicle regulator for applications which are reviewed and are either approved or denied accordingly.
Any further questions?
Well, not a statement.
Questions I'm taking, you can make your statement if I get a mover and a seconder. Councillor Priest.
I'll move it.
Thank you. Moved Councillor Priest.
Second.
Seconded Councillor De Vries. Councillor, you wish to speak to it?
No, I think enough's been said, thank you.
Yes, we've gone to a lot of trouble and expense to create increased capacity for our freight route, precisely so that we can do this. So it would be crazy not to, in my opinion.
Any further comments? Councillor Hearn, you wanted to make a statement?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm using it a bit tonight. Yes, I've had a lot to do with that particular, the bridge widening. At one stage I was in favour of all of that and got the new initiative to have that, to see if that was feasible. Having spoken to the manager of the quarries, and that's where it started a few years ago, when the new manager came in to get larger vehicles in there, because as the CEO pointed out, they're going to be larger vehicles, and this road now really complies with B doubles and the longer vehicles. So I just urge you to support this particular motion.
No further comments? All those in favour? Carried. Seven 7.5.1, the Waste Management Sustainability Strategy Roadmap Resourcing, on page 173. Any questions?
Mayor, just in regards to the additional position and the service aspect, will that mean that the Springton waste transfer station will be possibly open more often, or is that purely around the education and the information provision side of the waste management aspect?
Yeah, through the Mayor, it is primarily looking at the position from an education sustainability perspective, not the operational component. But that's not to say that this position can't work with the Works Department to look at how the Springton facility can operate more efficiently.
Any further questions?
There is a recommendation. Oh, Councillor Schilling.
Oh no, I wanted to remove the recommendation.
If there's no further questions, I'll take.
Councillor Schilling moving and Councillor Greatbridge seconding the motion. You wish to speak to it, Councillor Schilling?
Oh, look, it ticks all my boxes: environment, waste, sustainability, climate change. Yay! I think it's time our council addressed all those topics in a more proactive way. So I'm all for it. Thank you to the staff for this initiative.
Lost Councillor Hearn.
Councillor Greatbridge, do you wish to speak to it?
Thank you. I'd like to echo my fellow councillors' enthusiastic embracing of addressing climate change. And also to just note that in a lot of conversations that I've been having with ratepayers and residents, and some of these conversations have been raised with the executive as well, and I think certainly during the election campaign period, waste and waste management, these issues were raised really frequently with me as a candidate. And actually, when I had the opportunity to investigate them more thoroughly with the executive, and I'm grateful for the time that's been invested in answering my multitudinous questions in that regard, it has become really clear to me that it isn't necessarily that there's a deficiency in the services that are being provided, but a lack of education for the community and understanding what is available, how to access it, and education is a critical component of that. So I was really pleased to see that this role does include a defined aspect of that role. And I'd also just like to note that I've been really fortunate in a lot of roles in my time in the Barossa to work alongside employees of the council, and they do an extraordinary job, and the opportunity to increase this role to potentially to a full-time role and kind of take all of that into consideration, I think is very worthwhile. So I recommend this.
Councillor Drew.
Yeah, I'd like to just echo that opinion. I was only approached just in January by a prominent businessman and just exactly these issues. And, you know, what was the council doing? What are our policies? How are we embedding it? And I was like, well, it's sort of a bit sporadic. You know, we have a bit here and a bit here. And, you know, we're putting solar panels up. And it was just, there was no consistency that I could actually tell him. But also I think that the community sentiment is actually moving towards sustainability, circular economy and that sort of thing. And even net zero emissions, and I think it's no longer optional that we sort of float around without some sort of structure to our a strategy. And I've actually seen in the last year, 2 years since I've been working, that almost every grant that I've actually applied for has to have a sustainability element, and that's in the community realm, not even in, it's actually got to be a sustainable model. So I think that is very, very important, that we got to realise that will be coming through all of the time, not just in building, environment, everything. And also the report indicates that we're lagging, and I think that we need to embed this in a lot of our policies. So, and education, I'm always, banging on about education, and I think that, we need a face that's going to go out into the community, join the committees, go to the schools, educate people all over the place, businesses, actually work with businesses. So I think this is a great policy, and I appreciate that whole, the strategy and roadmap. I will really be supporting it. Thank you.
Yeah, I just reiterate what Councillor Treat said, and I'd really like to see a partnership with schools. Being a teacher as well, I just know how important it is, and how the lack of education from such a young age, and particularly if parents aren't educated in the process, then it's a bit of a brick wall. So if we can get some partnerships with the schools across the region as well, I think that would be targeting a whole different demographic in a really effective way.
I'd just like to support what's been said by Councillor Troop and Thompson and Councillor Greatwich, in that I can see this role taking on a broader application throughout our community, from a primary production level as well. Carbon in agriculture and emissions has been a huge thing for a period of time and is only growing in escalation. So I can, the multifaceted application throughout our whole community, and in both in the townships and in agriculture. So I think it's a great thing. Thank you.
Through the chair, question to the CEO. You've got there the costings of $95,000. So this is an increase of $38,000 to the increased cost to the ratepayer when we're lacking in other services, footpaths and roads, and parklands that need fixing up. Does that include superannuation and other liabilities with that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's the full cost of the full-time job, yes. All costs related to providing that service. The increase, the 38 is the increase because it's only 0.4 of a job increase.
Any further comments? Councillor Shilling, do you wish to close the debate? Thank you. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Seven 7.5.2 on page 211, it's the landscape levy equalisation. There's a report being provided giving background and to those increased costs associated with the landscape board with a recommendation. Any questions?
Thank you.
Councillor Gray.
I know that the recommendations asks that it be voiced, that the strong objection be voiced, and seek that the state collect its own taxes in this regard. And I understand the political element of this. It notes that this is the current arrangement for the emergency services levy. Is that the only example of this, or is there in fact a precedence whereby the state collect, that this be an anomaly that we're seeking to kind of bring into equalisation with the way that it is ordinarily done, which is the state collect the taxes rather than it be leveraged through local government? So we're seeking to correct an anomaly rather than create a new precedent in this regard?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Councillor. The emergency services levy component really comes from my experience of implementing the emergency services levy. So the rationale with that is that they now have the databases to collect this themselves. That's the only reason I've mentioned that. So yes, they have other land tax bases. So the principle being that let's reignite the debate about them collecting their own taxes and levies. This is a debate that has been run for ever since the NRM levy came in 2003, from memory. It's been run and lost on many occasions. I know exactly because I used to work for ministers. I know what letter will come back. But I think it is at least unreasonable to expect the ratepayers to be forking out another $150,000 a year and not at least try to phase it in. So if part one is not amenable to council, I think we should at least be voicing, can we at least phase this in to our ratepayers?
Question, Councillor Barrett.
Do we have any say in what landscape area we are in, or is that the cards we've been dealt?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we actually lobbied previously when it went from the NRM to the landscape reforms, landscape levy reforms with the then minister, and on 2 occasions I think it was, and we now have the hand we are dealt.
Councillor Greatwich.
Are we in do we have a cohesive approach in this regard with the other councils that are affected? And I understand that there's some variance in terms of who's being impacted, but in terms of the mechanism by which we're seeking to kind of the change that we're seeking in the mechanisation of the collection, but also in the kind of opposition to the councils being required to collect it on their behalf. Are they in agreement with us on this position?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the older councils for some years have believed and had a position at the LGA level as well to lobby to have them collect their own tax, but that has been rejected on many occasions. And it is likely to be here because, yes, it is an efficient way to collect the tax because it's in. Your question about equalisation is a very pertinent one because Mr Mavrinac will be able to tell me how many councils roughly are involved in that landscape levy. But some will win, absolutely. Some, it is a redistribution of the taxation burden, very much like a thing called the revaluation initiative, if anybody's had the fun of trying to set rates and taxes in the last 2 years in this council, because it is shifting the rate burden. So many councils will not support our position because their ratepayers will pay less.
Be interested to see if they reduce their. Councillor Green, questions?
Yes, this is for Mr Mavrinac. It may have been in the report and maybe I missed it, but is this equalisation happening just within our region or is it happening statewide? In other words, will this council end up paying roughly the same, will people within this council be paying the same as people within every council in the state, which would be a true equalisation? Or is this just a artificial equalisation based on another set of boundaries which has been created because 2 councils moved out and so on?
Well, yeah, sorry, I was ahead, but you're right.
Mr Angus.
So through the Mayor, I I don't know the answer to that in the sense that I don't know if the other landscape regions are going through the same process. So I'm only aware of the Northern York at this stage.
It's not a good system, is it? No, it really isn't. However, as I'm on, I'd just like to ask the CEO, what is the administrative burden in us collecting the old NRM fees? I mean, I agree, it shouldn't be our job, but what actually does it cost us in terms of time and effort and you know?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I can look that up whilst we answer any other questions, if you like.
Is it extensive?
No, it's at a guess, somewhere around $5,000 a year in terms of effort. Not significant, no.
We should bill them for it.
We do build them for it. That is the component we bill.
Oh, good.
But I would argue, it's not for me to enter the debate, but I would argue the fundamental problem we have here is a ratepayer receives a bill, they look at the bottom line, that includes a bill of $60, which we don't have one say on where that money goes. That's the fundamental problem of collecting somebody else's tax.
Councillor Hearn, I'm still starting with questions. Is it a question?
Yes. Is this a fait accompli? And if so, how do we get that very message that the CEO put out to our ratepayers? Maybe we can put something on our rate notice that this, with a big arrow, this is not ours.
We do every ratepayer notice. And yes, it is a fait accompli, it's going to happen. That is the legislative, the policy position.
Councillor Priest.
Yeah, through the chair to the CEO. Is there a cost like, is it $50 extra to the ratepayers of the Barossa council area or $60 extra per year?
Through you, Mr Mayor, thanks Councillor. It's hard to give you for one particular ratepayer, but the average ratepayer, I think for Mary was $52, $53 for an average residential ratepayer. So it will differ for different types of properties because some of it's based on valuation.
Yeah, is this an increase over the previous year?
Yeah, 43.9%.
Yeah, so it was $40 approximately, now it's going to be what, $60?
It's in, give me a second and I'll just find it in the report.
On the page 212.
I can't remember the figure off the top of my head. The average at the moment is 35.77 and it'll rise to 55.36.
So that is a huge increase in ratepayers.
$20.
43.9%. Estimate.
Councillor DeVries.
Thank you, Worship. I guess this is a question to the CEO, through you. Do we have to make a decision on this today? The reason I ask is because if this equalisation is basically statewide, as much as it annoys me, if that is in fact the case, then I can live with it because I guess we've been getting a good run for a while. But if this is this equalisation is not statewide and it is because of a set of artificial boundaries, then that's a different matter. So given that Mr Mavernack doesn't have an answer to that at this stage, or you do, okay, then can I repeat my question from before?
I'm just looking at, just doing a quick Google of other boards, and it looks like the Arid Landscape Board is equally introducing a landscape equalisation process. So I would say it's probably a statewide process that all landscape boards are going through.
Being required to pay the same as everyone else in the state. Is that the...
So each board determines the amount that it wishes to collect. So if the Northern York Board wishes to collect $3.5 million from its rate base, it will use this equalisation policy to collect that amount of money. Greater Adelaide, Green Adelaide will collect, in the tune of multi-million dollars from Metro Adelaide. The Hills and Fluoro might say that their budget for operational costs is $6 million. So each region will determine its own budget, to which then it gets from the rate base through this process.
I guess the best way to think about it, through you, Mr. Mayor, it's an equalisation within each border, within each board. What each board collects is not equalised.
And if I may.
So I think this question was asked before. Do we get to choose which region we're in, and can we appeal? Because I think maybe that would be a better, because the part one's not going to happen, so it's symbolic, but maybe a real option would be to say we're in the wrong board, this is inappropriate for our needs. I don't mind contributing, providing we're getting a benefit, but now I'm starting to debate. I apologise.
I think the answer to that question, or the component that was a question, is you might want to do the research what that might be too, because it might be more.
But if we're getting a bigger chunk.
I think the point that I'm sort of seeing in the recommendation, we're probably stuck with the issue, but I think point 2 is the critical thing that I'm seeing here, is that if they're going to do equalisation, it's about just phasing it in if they're going to do it, rather than hit everybody to that percentage. Any other questions? So we can move on with the debate if we need to.
I'm happy to move the motion, but I would like to delete part 1, because I think that's just going to annoy them. I was going to say something else. And I think part 2 is core. So it would then read as the opening statement is, but then and seek the equalisation is phased over a minimum of 5 years. If we're asking them to show a bit of large yes towards us, then we shouldn't be sort of starting off with an angry outburst at the beginning. That's sort of how it reads at this stage.
Okay, so it's been moved by Councillor De Vries that we delete part 1. Is there a seconder?
Is there a process by which to say that I think that, with the deepest of respect to Councillor De Vries, that I think that we can leave that first section in? Is there a mechanism by which I can say that?
Don't second it.
Yes, I'm not seconding it. I'm asking a procedural question.
Correct.
Yep.
What Councillor Angus told you. You don't second it.
You don't second it. I'll just look for a seconder. No, that is the motion we have at the moment. It's not an amendment. That's the motion. Is there a seconder? Okay, the lack of a seconder. Is there another one who wants to put? Councillor Angus.
I'll move.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Councillor.
I was going to move the original motion, sorry, if you want to move it. No. Okay.
Okay, Councillor Priest, you've moved the original recommendation, which is now the motion. Councillor Angus, you've seconded it. Councillor Priest, you wish to speak to it?
No, I think enough's been said at this stage.
Okay.
I won't be voting against this, but I just want to make it clear why I wanted to do it. We have this discussion every year and it goes nowhere. It's purely symbolic. I don't know, if I was a member of the government and someone came to me and said, I would like you to phase this in over 5 years, oh, and by the way, screw you, I would probably respond in kind. If you want people to help you and if you want to get a favour out of them, and we are ultimately asking them for a favour, you don't start off by basically giving them the middle finger. And I think that's what we're doing. We're giving them the middle finger first, and then, oh, and by the way, can you give us a favour? If we genuinely want to get this phased in over 5 years, I would recommend that we do not antagonise the people who are we're asking for. That being so, actually, no, I won't be supporting this motion as a result of that, because I think it's counterproductive. I think that if we do this, we're less likely to get what we want.
Any further comments? Councillor Greatwich.
I think, again, with the very deepest of respect, I take your point, Councillor De Vries. Having had a fair bit to do with government, I think this is probably the gentlest middle finger that they'll have had for a very long time. And I think that purely from a philosophical position, it is actually a correct statement to say that the state collect its own taxes. It may well be that there is some politicking that happens around this, but purely from a philosophical position, I think that that is an accurate statement, and I'm happy to support it remaining as it is.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Members, we now go into a confidential item, which is the Santos Tour Down Under 2024 expression of interest. Okay, councillors, I'll resume the meeting and we are dealing with a confidential item. Would someone like to move that we go into confidence? Moved Councillor Priest and seconded Councillor De Vries. All those in favour? It's carried. Councillors, that comes to a conclusion for our January meeting. Our next scheduled meeting is the third Tuesday at 5:30. So with that, I'll formally close the January meeting of council. Thank you for your attendance.
Now we do need 5 minutes, otherwise I'm going to burst.